out how to, thank you, how to work as a team with this and how to make it easy for everyone. The other thing I would like to say is that when I'm starting to share, I will most likely not be able to see the screen. So if you're writing in the chat, Kat will be monitoring that. I won't be seeing that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm just going to begin sharing. So this subject of what do my salty tears have to do know about softness? The concept came to me on the day of October the 7th. The day, I'm going to read a little bit to you and go between reading and sharing and slides and everything. So the day of October the 7th has become an infamous day now, the day Hamas broke borders to attack and take hostages. And the day Bibi Netanyahu and the American government, to my memory, began announcing their plans of retaliation. And I remember thinking, if only he would grieve instead of take revenge. So with nonviolent communication, whenever we have a thought like that, a judgment, my thought was the judgment of the situation. I made this judgment, oh, if only he would grieve instead of taking revenge. Nonviolent communication says every judgment is an expression of a universal human need. So hidden beneath that thought was my longing for peace and safety and understanding, and these connection to beautiful universal human needs. So at that stage I was convinced that if a human allows themselves to feel sadness, to feel that deep pain in their heart, that basically inevitably we feel in the process of life, my thought was they would be softened and rinsed in the gentle waters of compassion. I wanted Mr. Netanyahu to grieve and cry and choose to do that instead of to bomb people. I wanted a soft response. But because I am a bear of very little brain, as my granny would say, I needed a friend to point out to me that many people caught in the same war would also cry tears of grief, but at the same time as they cried these tears of grief, they would also be cursing other people and cursing those that killed members of their family. And so as they were crying, they were vowing vengeance. And so I came to realize, yeah, okay, it's true. The process of crying in nonviolent communication has got so many beautiful connotations, but okay, it's true. Not all tears are bitter, but not all tears are sweet either. And so it's not just the act of crying that makes us soft. We can also become hard in crying, but that hardness is connected to thoughts. So I'm going to share my screen now with you. Yeah. Yeah. So, what do my salty tears know about softness? And it began this kind of thought I had actually began a very beautiful exploration into the life of tears. So I thought we could spend a little bit of time looking at what tears are. So luckily, I've had 3 good cries in the last week, just coincidentally and quite serendipitously. And each one of those cries had a profound effect on me physiologically. So whenever we cry, we're actually beginning to look at the composition of tears. And tears contain many things. They have stress hormones in them. So when we cry, we release our tension through our tears. And some of the other chemical composition of emotional tears, this session will be specifically on emotional tears and crying. Not the kind of tears that we have when we want to get the dust out of our eyes or when we cut onions. These tears contain proteins associated with stress. So acetylcholine, adrenaline, non-adrenaline, and acetylcholine, however you say it, is a neurotransmitter, and it plays a function in the formation of memory, which I thought was really interesting because tears are we often cry in relation to our memory, and memories are released and experienced again through our tears. So there's this connection between the two. But tears are also really fascinating. So one thing that I discovered is if you smell tears, the testosterone in the body drops significantly. Not just a little bit. This was a significant drop in testosterone. And it is believed that this is to elicit the nurturing impulse in someone. So from a scientific perspective, tears are, we developed this aptitude for crying to serve the purpose of the nurturing function, right? And in actual fact, what's fascinating about tears, I was to discover that it is considered mostly a human thing to cry tears. There are some instances of gorillas crying, dogs, they think maybe cry emotional tears, and maybe elephants too, but for the large part, it appears to be a very human phenomenon. So, and a very beautiful phenomenon. I used to actually call myself the crying nonviolent communication teacher because I used to cry all the time. And very early in the beginning of my NVC journey, I had so much healing to do, and I would find myself in circle and just cry and cry and cry. And I remember saying to my then NVC teacher, you know, will the crying ever stop? And he said, yes, but maybe you need a little bit more help than others. And he suggested some other healing. But there was something about being in the space of non-judgmental, compassionate presence that just allowed so many tears to fall and so much healing to happen through that. So I was thinking what I would like to do is put you into breakout rooms and for you to share a memory of crying. So when was the last time you cried, and can you share something about it? So we'll put you in rooms. How many people do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 3 rooms of 3, and you can share a memory about crying. Just tell a story of when you recently cried. And if you can't tell a story of a recent crying, maybe a memory from childhood. And if not yourself, then someone else that you remembered crying, just a memory about crying. And I'll give you a few prompts, but you can think about where were you, who was there, and what made you cry. And when you cried, do you remember how it felt to cry? Before, during, and after, what was that process? And you can even notice, if you can recall, what thoughts were involved in that crying. Okay, so we're going to begin that beautiful process, that beautiful gift we have is to share our authenticity in the presence of another and be heard and received. In the giving and receiving of our authenticity and sharing, and we're going to listen to each other. So yeah, we're going to spend in these rooms of 15 minutes. You've got 5 minutes to tell your story and be heard and just have a little connection and memory with crying. What do I want to say here? So firstly, okay, I'll just say a couple of things, then I'll see if there are questions. So firstly, going into the breakout room, I'm going to ask that we all make an agreement of confidentiality because, we're choosing to share with the people in that breakout room in this time and place. And we're not choosing to share in any other time, in another context, in another setting, with another person we might not want to share. So Yeah, can we have an agreement with everyone and you can just thumbs up or to confidentiality? Thank you. Yabo, thank you, Mo and Lindsay, Justine, and Jax. I'm going to, yeah, thank you. Nice. You can also just raise your, what's it called? Petrochemical love. Yay! My brain is not working. I didn't click. I knew the name, but I didn't click her face. Hi, Justine. Happy to see you. Lindsay and Jax, if you are willing just to, will you watch for that, Kat? Will you get the Lindsay, Flip and Jax their consent for confidentiality? Kat, did I get her? Thanks.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Oh, right, you did already, Flip. Sorry. Okay. Lindsay. Okay, thank you. And lastly, Jack. So the other thing I want to share is self-responsibility. So it's a gentle practice, this. You don't have to share anything too deep, but just remember that you are responsible for your own self. So don't share anything you're not comfortable sharing. The beautiful agreement of self-responsibility. So I ask you to bear that in mind. Yeah, listen to what you feel comfortable sharing, and it's okay to take care of yourself. So don't share if you don't want to share. Just you can sit in silence. You can choose to just listen. So when you're thinking of something to share, if you can't think of anything and it's your 5 minutes, just sit in silence and allow the silence to speak to you, and maybe a memory will come, and then you can begin sharing. Crying serves. Mwah, thank you. Sharing serves the very beautiful purpose of helping us feel better. And so, actually, once we have cried, we have released oxytocin and we have released endorphins into our bodies. And those are not the only cocktails that we find within tears. They also find a painkiller in tears. So tears help us reduce pain, awaking the nurturing instinct, reducing aggression. And yet we have somehow also developed a very strange relationship to tears where we are uncomfortable sharing them, and sometimes we perceive those that cry as weak. And yet there is this profound intelligence behind our tears. The other thing that tears will do is they work and they activate our parasympathetic nervous system. So instead of the fight, flight, freeze system waking up, crying wakes up our system that is connected to relaxation. And that's another reason why when we cry, we sleep better. So you spoke about crying being work. Well, it's also actually just there to help us sleep as well. We sleep better, we can rest, we can tend and befriend ourselves after we cry. And we generally get it when we have experienced a very strong emotion. That is how science views it. It's an intelligent response of the body, there to elicit a nurturing response and de-stress our own bodies in response to very strong emotions. However, from the perspective of nonviolent communication, when crying emerges, when there is crying, that for me as an NVC listener or practitioner, if I'm sitting in someone in empathy or in the space of, listening and support, when someone cries and I'm listening to them, that's the signal for me to go, oh, this is important to this person. Or if I begin to cry, if I'm speaking to someone and they're giving me their full presence and tears arise, that's for me to know, oh, this matters to me. This is really important to me. So yeah, if you have ever seen, I've just recently been away, and if you've ever seen how a giraffe listens, they become very still and they just observe, and they're really, really curious. And so, yeah, sometimes we can rush to want to fix someone and find it very uncomfortable when we are listening and someone cries. But actually, if we bring our giraffe listening, become very still, just observing and open, then we can receive this information that something important is happening for that person. And so if we want to listen to the heart, when someone cries, we know that they are being touched by something that matters to them. And it's an opportunity for us to experience emotional intimacy with that person. Yeah. It's also connected to, meaning. So like we say, that's meaningful for that person. And if you rush to fix the pain or stop it, you can firstly stop that person's process, and also miss out on an opportunity. And what I wanted to do was just share with you just this very beautiful scene that in a movie that made a huge impression on me. And being with someone when they cry allows us to experience what one of my favorite nonviolent communication teachers, Bono Langer, calls the greatest movie on earth, human authenticity. So I really would love us to. Sorry, it's taking me a while because it's on a it's on a pirate site, so it takes me a while to get through all the the hoops. Okay, let's watch it now. Coming. Let's just sit together and watch this beautiful scene. Give me a second. Okay, hold on. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to get it ready again because I don't want you to. Obviously needed to reload it. Sorry, I did try to prepare it for you. Such a beautiful scene that really struck with me. The real beauty of tears and their effect on the body. I might have to give this one a skip. Here we go. Hold on. Sorry, I'm nearly there. Sorry, guys. All very... Jeepers. I'm so sorry it's taking so long. Okay. Here we go. There we go. Just a tiny little scene that I just love, and just really, I don't know, showing the beauty of this beautiful process, crying. Is there anyone that would like to make a comment now at this point? Any heart reactions to the scene or... before we begin. Yeah, just a little heart there, I see.
And I'd also like to make a short comment,
Yes,
Jack.
yes,
That was really
please.
beautiful for me to see that she put this rice cake into her mouth and then broke down and started crying. Almost like there's something so nourishing, like, almost something so visceral about it and how it led her to break down. So I'm just sitting with that. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much. Yeah, I resonate. I'm going to continue so that we can share together and enjoy morning together. So, yeah, to continue on the NVC thread, what are you guys seeing? Are you seeing meaning? Probably not.
No,
Sorry,
thank you.
We see
okay,
you.
hold. Okay, let me.
At least you feel seen, right?
Yes. Meeting my needs of being seen. Okay, not necessarily my needs of efficiency. It's like a puzzle, all these pieces of what's happening in what moment. Okay, now you see meaning,
Now we
huh?
see meaning.
Okay, beautiful. So yeah, mourning. Crying is connected to this very beautiful universal need called mourning. And it helps us to move on. And there's something about crying that is got to do with connecting us to the reality of life. So we're not actually seeking something. We're not making, that thing that sometimes we were told, like many of us have been told to stop crying or carry on crying. I'm going to give you something to cry about. I don't know how many of you ever had someone say that to you. I know I was certainly told to stop crying. And yet, it's such a beautiful life process that actually helps us to move on and to continue, but open to what is there. Yeah. So Gabor Mate says trauma is unaccompanied pain. And I have told this story quite a few times, so maybe you've heard it before. But um, in a war, I think in Nepal, and there were children that were child soldiers, and they went through torture camps and all sorts of things. And those that came back to their villages and were allowed to talk about it and allowed to grieve their experience and were received for their experience, they experienced no trauma. But those that were shunned or ridiculed and judged for fighting, they experienced a lot of trauma. So either if we are listening or speaking, if we are the receiver or the sharer, this gift of our authenticity and the ability to tolerate and open to pain, to our own or just being in the presence of another, is very deeply connected to our relationship of life. And as some of you have already mentioned, whoever that beautiful speaker was, I'm sorry I couldn't see your name, but he spoke about this, the nourishing aspect of crying and mourning. Crying and mourning. It is a very deep digestion process. It's a process that it is very much part of a healthy, nourishing emotional life cycle, but that requires, it happens in its own time. And it we like if a python if you move a python when it's digesting something, you can actually kill it. We need to be very still to Yoram Mosensen, the beautiful NVC teacher, he describes mourning as a certain he like describes it as this like contraction, like this pulling you inward to be still and to take care of what's inside. And often it's about loss. Crying is about loss, and mourning is about digesting loss. And this loss can be our dreams, unwanted things happening, wanted things not happening, or wanted things, yeah, not happening. And they lead us through these processes of life. And our let me stop the share and just share with you. So our mourning also matures It ebbs and flows with our own individual mourning processes. For example, there's a beautiful folk story, and it tells the tale of 7 fairy sisters who crossed the bounds of fairy law. They broke fairy law by marrying 7 mortal men. So these were 7 immortal fairy sisters, and they brought upon themselves and their fine huntsman husbands the inescapable punishment for their few weeks of love and happiness. And they had wed and had beautiful celebrations, and they knew they could not break law and marry mortal men, but they did. And so as 7 stars fell in the sky to alert the fairy sisters that their husbands had died in battle, they began to weep and weep in deep grief. And their mother, the fairy queen, came down from the sky where she was residing in star form, and she took pity on her daughters. She knew she had to fulfill fairy law, and they were not allowed to continue in their form, and they were not allowed to stay fairies, but she could prevent the death, and they were allowed to live. They were allowed life, but she had to turn them forever into the form of 7 springs of clear and beautiful water, flowing eternally in the depths of the forest, say the people who lived on the outskirts of this beautiful, dark and whispering wood. And 4 of these springs, that were 4 of the 7 sisters, would forever spout cold water, clear and crisp, that would quench the thirsts and clean the clothes and bodies of forest dwellers and travelers, weary travelers. But the 3 daughters who wept when they wept before they were turned into springs, and they wept not for themselves, but the 3 daughters that wept for the fate of their husbands. And their mourning was not for themselves, but their mourning had matured into a mourning for others. And they were turned into springs of hot, bubbling waters with healing powers. I so love that beautiful story. Yeah. So mourning, let me show you, is this beautiful process that is just there to nourish life. Kat was saying earlier, Kat, can you speak into the microphone what you were saying about all tears are making way for joy or something?
I was saying that during quite a very difficult period in my life, I had a rearrangement of my relationship with crying, because crying had always been something that had been shunned as a child and was a sign of weakness. And at the time in my life when I needed to cry the most, I learned that tears are making room for joy. And so it hasn't been an overnight journey, but now when I cry, I see it as a really effective process. And rather than restricting it or trying to be polite about it or leaving it until later, I find a way to really get stuck in, because I feel like it's a team effort. And if you can get them up and out, then you've left a lot more space for joy to enter.
Thank you so much. So tears make space for joy. That is so resonating exactly with the NVC understanding that just as there is night and day, we have equal measures in this lifetime and equal need to mourn and celebrate. So Marshall Rosenberg says humans are only ever doing one of 2 things. They're saying please or thank you. And so in some way, we are, mourning is just this natural part of life. It's a natural activity, but it's also a conscious act that we do to care for life and to acknowledge, and as a form of emotional hygiene. Yeah, and it makes way quite naturally with celebration. So just as night brings the morning as in a metaphor, then it makes way for day, but only if it's needs connected. So that's the very specific thing about nonviolent communication, is that it's not enough to just cry. So when I spoke earlier about those people that they were crying, but whilst they were crying, they were in a war, their family had been killed, but whilst they were crying, they were swearing vengeance. And that is the very profound difference that nonviolent communication makes, is that it has a few disciplines, like foundations, that it's born upon. And the one is that we connect our crying not to this almost knee-jerk reaction we have to seek who is responsible outside of us for our pain and blaming others for our pain, that misconception of the so-called jackal world that NVC is transitioning us out of. So revenge, there are so many deaths and so much suffering is built and bitterness is built on this idea of someone else, their actions being the cause of my pain. And then instead of turning inwards and embracing with compassion what we are experiencing, we act out on the outside. So NVC is this thing of connecting our pain on the inside to the universal human need. I don't know what I connected as touring. We're not touring, it's mourning. No, NVC mourning is needs connected mourning. That slide is absolutely not the correct slide, but I made lots of mistakes with that. But yeah, so it's not true mourning unless it's needs connected mourning. And then once we sit in the need and we cry our tears, but we connect them to the universal human need, then it turns into that beautiful sweet pain, and it carries you naturally into your celebration. And so our tears then mirror to us our deepest longings, and it takes us into acceptance. That whole thing of forgive and accept, we don't have to force ourselves. We are just cried into the dream of acceptance and the dance of surrender when we connect our grieving to the universal human need. Yeah, so that is going to stop sharing now. And I'm going to open up the room for comments.